This is part 3 of Sonny Govern's Introduction to Recording, and in this lesson we're going to talk about levels. Now before we dive in, I just want to remind you to go and get your headphones and put them on so that you can hear properly what it is that we're going to be working on. So let's dive in. The first thing that we're going to look at with regard to levels is just the same thing that we were looking at in the last lesson. That is the saxophone solo, but instead of thinking about reverb, this time we're going to think about levels. Now before I play it, I'd like to point out to you that this here is the saxophone track, and we're going to have a look at the level here on this track as it's playing. So here it is. Okay, so it's sounding great, but some of you might already know what I'm going to say. It's too loud. Yeah, it's too loud. Now, what we want to do is find a nice balance for it in the mix so that it can still be clearly heard, but that it's not overpowering anything else that we have there. So, how do we do that? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is use our ears, because those are the best thing to tell us when it's loud enough or too loud or it's too quiet, whatever the issue might be. We hear that first. That's how we tell. And then after we hear it, we make an adjustment on the level meter. Now, your DAW might have it in a different place. The shortcut on Logic Pro, by the way, is just the letter X on the keyboard. This will bring up your mixer window. And from here, I can adjust the level. Now, I should also tell you that I can do it right here on the track. If I want to adjust the level of the saxophone solo, so if I want to make it very quiet, for example, I can... So that's too quiet, isn't it? So what we're going to do is we'll play the saxophone solo and we'll turn it up to a point that it's sounding good, but hopefully not too loud. Here we go. So that's pretty close. I want it to be about the same level as the guitar. I like it there. So that's the level for it. That's where I'm going to leave it. Well, let me just say, what would happen if it was too loud? So let's say you really love the saxophone, and let's say you really want to hear a lot of this saxophone solo, and you want it to be a big, powerful saxophone solo when it comes in. Okay, so you're going to turn it up. What happens if you turn it up? Let's find out. Okay, so now we can see what happens if we turn it up too much. What's happening there is it's just taking up all the space in the mix, yeah? And it's actually making everything else sound quieter. The saxophone sounds really loud and present, but everything else is sounding like miles away behind it, yeah? So it's eating up all the space. So yeah, that's not what we want. What you want is to have it balanced across the levels. So in relation to where your vocals are, in relation to where your guitars are, the other solo, the drums, the bass, all of that has a relationship together to be roughly the same level. Now, you might want to make a feature of the saxophone and a feature of the guitar, in which case that might be a bit louder. A lot of people like to make a feature of the drums, so they're often a little bit louder in the mix. But if it is louder. It's just a little bit louder, yeah. You're just going to make small adjustments as to the balance of what you think needs to be where. Everything should be roughly at the same level, yeah. And once you've done that, once you can see that things are arriving on the level meter at roughly the same place, like in the mix, I'll show you just another part of this mix, for example, where you can see that things are basically in the same place.
It's to start and end the same way. I'm due a heart attack, and so I'm waiting.
So here what we can see is we have the vocals, the guitar, and the bass and the drums. And we can see what kind of levels they're arriving at.
Start on the track and turn when you're ready, so all the lines you cross are not an ending. And if you do get lost, that's when you're ready. The universe never stops.
So what happened there is I'm looking across the mix and I see that the drums are a little bit louder than I want them to be in terms of the balance, in terms of the level meters. So I bring the drums down. That actually helps to make everything sound louder, yeah, because you've got a nice balance so it can all go up. Now if you have one thing, drum, saxophone, whatever, eating up all the space, when you turn it up, the saxophone gets even louder and the other stuff that's really quiet gets just a little bit louder, yeah. So the whole mix doesn't sound that much louder. You just have an extremely loud saxophone or drums or whatever your feature might be. When you're making a feature of something in a mix, do it with the level very subtly. Yeah, it should only be very slightly above. Okay, so with that said, we go back to the saxophone solo. We'll just double check that I've left that level where I like it. Just check that time. Okay, so the saxophone solo is sitting where I like it. One of the things that you can do at the end of this lesson is download the stems for this track and put the saxophone solo where you like it. Okay, so there's a couple other things that we can talk about with regards to levels. One of them is something that's extremely cool and that you should know about, and that is automation. Now in Logic Pro, you'll find automation here. It says show hide automation. You do that, it will open the automation window. The shortcut's A, so you can just do that as well. Your DAW might have it in a different place, so just find the automation window and you should be able to draw in automation. Now, what is automation? And what does it mean to say draw in automation? Okay, at the end of this track, after the saxophone and guitar solos are finishing off, I have a fade out, which is, I think you'll be familiar where the track just gradually gets quieter until it's finished. And I do that, you make a fade out by automating the volume. So what I've got here, if I come out of automation mode, is the stereo out, the master out channel, the master channel. And on that channel, I've went into automation mode, and this here is a line, a yellow line that represents the level of this meter. Yeah, so this is the meter here, and if this yellow line was to go up or down, this fader will move up or down. So here we have, I've drawn in 2 points on this line by clicking a point, moving it around like that. That's very simple to do. You just click 2 places, move them where you want them. You can click 3 places, as many places as you want. You can have all sorts of automations drawn in, and it doesn't have to be straight. It can move in lots of directions, whatever you think. Now, as I say, what I've done is I've drawn a simple fade out at the end of this track, and if we watch it happen here in automation mode, it looks like this. So it plays along, it goes down the curve, very simple, we hear the track fading out. If we watch the same thing happen now in the mixer window, here is this channel, this is the fader for that channel. I'm not going to touch it, I will not put my hands on the mouse. Watch this. Yeah, so that's a fade out, that's an automated fade out. Levels are something that's very common to automate, but you can automate just about anything within a DAW. That's worth remembering. So if you want to turn up the reverb or adjust the reverb or the compression or the delay, whatever you might be using, you can almost certainly automate that to happen. So EQ would be another common one where you might automate a change in EQ, and we might talk about that a little bit in the EQ lesson if there's time. So we've adjusted the levels of our saxophone solo, we've adjusted the levels of our drums. Let's just make sure at the end of this track, where we have both the saxophone and the guitar solos happening, we also have some keys and we have some reverbs, and the bass and the drums are still in. So let's just have a look across our level meters. That would be the drums, the bass, the keyboards, and the solos, which would be the saxophone and the guitar solos, which are here. So yeah, saxophone, guitar, pianos, bass and drums. Let's have a look at how those levels are looking across the mix at the end of the track. Okay, so we look at those levels. What do we say? You might say to me, well, the piano's very quiet. Could we have more piano maybe? If that is to your taste, you can download these stems, you can turn up the piano. For me, I don't want to make a big feature of the piano at the end of the track, so that's why when we look at these levels here at the end, we can see that what's happening is the attack's not too bad, but it's dying out quite well. That's the effect that I'm after, but you might want to adjust that. You could even automate it with the volume if that was something that you wanted to keep. I would say from looking at those levels, I feel like I could do with just a little bit more bass. From looking at the levels, from listening to it, the bass, I can hear it, it's there, but I feel like I can get a little bit more out of it in the space. Okay, so I've just made a slight adjustment there on the bass as well, and I'm happy with the levels across the tune. I guess the last thing that we could do to check for levels, or to check the levels on this track, would be what level is the vocal at. So let's have a look at that as well, from the start.
When I wake up, the sun isn't shining, stare at the ceiling cracks and wonder what they mean. The thoughts that come rushing back, trying to save me. I haven't lost that much since I was 18, so I get up.
Okay, so the level of the vocal is fine, okay, and that I'm happy with where the attacks are coming in, those are loud enough. What I am slightly concerned about is the dynamic range of the vocal means it's quite difficult when it's quiet to hear everything that I'm saying or singing, and the subtleties of the phrasing, yeah, because the louder bits are coming in, they're nice and loud, the quiet bits much quieter, not as clear. Okay, so that's a problem of dynamic range across the track. You might say you can automate this, yeah, so I could turn it up when it's a bit quieter and turn it back down when it's louder, but that's very time consuming, and not always the most natural thing to listen to either. It can sometimes sound a little bit strange when you hear the track turning up and down like that. So what would we do in this situation? And here is a pro tip for you right at the end of the lesson, is we would turn to a compressor. Now, compression will really get its own lesson another time, but for the moment, what you need to understand about compression is it will take those loud bits and make them a little bit quieter, and the quiet bits make them a little bit louder. And so a waveform that's got a really loud bit and a really quiet bit is going to be compressed together, yeah, so that the louds are quieter, the quiets are louder, and the signal is much easier to set a level for, yeah. Instead of it being up and down and do I need to automate this, what level can it go at, we find a signal that's not quite as loud, not quite as quiet, and therefore much easier to set a level with, yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just add a bit of compression here on this vocal channel and see what kind of level that I can then adjust the quiets and the louds to, yeah. So the as I say, the loud bits are going to be now a little bit quiet, the quiet bits be a little bit louder, and I should hopefully hear the vocal much clearer. Let's find out.
When I wake up, the sun isn't shining. Stare at the ceiling cracks and wonder what they mean. The thoughts that come rushing back, trying to save me. I haven't lost that much since I was 18. So I get up, think about dressing. Gentlemen, take your marks, it's gonna get messy. Everything needs to start.
Okay, so what's happened there is the whole thing now has gotten a little bit louder, okay? So quiets have gotten a little bit louder and the louds are coming down relative to the quiets, but the whole track now is a little bit louder because of the makeup gain. Yeah, so the compressor is now adding gain, it's making the whole thing louder. And I can adjust that by turning the gain down, either on the level here on the track, or I can adjust here on the inputs. I'll show you here.
When I wake up, the sun isn't shining.
Slight malfunction there, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try that again. Here we go.
The sun isn't shining. Stare at the ceiling cracks.
So you see, relative to the input, I can adjust that on the compressor. I can also do it with the output. So what's happening here is, as I say, the whole thing's gotten a little bit louder, and I'm going to tame that with the level here on the track. So I'm happy with the compression that I'm getting. Actually, let me just move it back to about where it was.
When I wake up, the sun isn't shining. Stare at the ceiling.
Lovely. So I'm happy with that. What I need to do now is just adjust the vocal down a little bit because the whole thing's gotten a little bit loud.
When I wake up, the sun isn't shining. Stare at the ceiling cracks and wonder what they mean. The thoughts that come rushing back, trying to save me. I haven't lost that much since I was 18. So I get up.
And that's how we do it. That's how we tame a track that's difficult to set a level for, yeah? If it's a problem of dynamic range, we add some compression, we compress the signal together, and we find it much easier to set a level. So there you go. That is levels. Hopefully that's useful for you. What you should do now is download the stems for this track and mess around with the levels yourself. See if you want the saxophone solo louder, or maybe you like more guitar. Maybe you want to mute the drums and add your own sample drums, whatever you want to do. Mess around with some levels and see what you can make happen. Enjoy.